need to address some of this shit. Cause I'm seeing a lot of shit that's throwing me off. Like I'm seeing a whole lot of old faces with new teeth. What the fuck is going on?
Good thing we're entering a new time when people can feel comfortable being who they really are. Because we couldn't do that when I was a kid. You couldn't. When I was a kid, you couldn't do any of that stuff, dude. If you grew up in the 80s and the 90s, if you did anything non-masculine, if you did anything remotely non-masculine as a dude, the whole neighborhood was like, fag! Santino's a fag! And I'd be like, I'm hugging my dad. And they'd be like, okay, fag, suck his dick, dude. I'd be like, you heard what he said, Pops, we gotta do it. It was crazy. That's crazy. I don't care about the judgment anymore. Because you don't know what other people like and don't like, you know? You don't know. Who are you to judge other people? Jesus was gay. Tell me Jesus wasn't gay. I watched a whole documentary on this guy. The whole time I was like, gay! It was wild. He was beautiful. He was so hot, this guy. Just jacked. Like an 8-pack, skinny, beautiful, long, straight hair. Never fucked girls. What are you talking about, dude? He could have had anybody in town. Have you seen his competition? Have you seen anybody from that time period? Horrific creatures. Everybody walking around like, hello, Jesus. They all had ailments he had to fix. No, but instead the guy washed dudes' feet and got followed around by 12 dudes all day long. All his magic was gay. All his magic was gay. A straight dude would be like, do you want to see me cannonball into this lake and make all the water come out of it? And he was like, do you want to see me tiptoe across a pond?
Now, my kids are fucking spoiled. That's right, and I did it, man. When they was little kids, I remember I used to take them to Disney a lot. I used to take them to Disney all the time, right? But I ain't take them like normal people, no. That's right, we went on the Illuminati package. That's right, we wasn't out there waiting to meet the characters like everybody else. We backstage chilling with the characters. That's right, I smoked a joint with Goofy. Fucking Minnie gave me a lap dance. Rubbed that big rat ass on me. That's right, man. My kids had it good. Had much better than me. Because when I was a kid, we went to Disney. That's right, me, my mother, my brothers, we went to Disney as poor people on a church trip. It's sad already, ain't it? On a church trip. New York to Orlando in August on a bus with no AC. It was so hot, I thought we were going to see the devil. Took us 2 days to get there because the driver was selling weed on the way. And when we finally got there, we wasn't really there because Disney's in Orlando and our hotel was in Alabama. And we stayed in some nasty motel and we had a bed that vibrates if you put a quarter in it. We little kids, we don't know this is a nasty, cummed up mattress. And we begging my mother, Mommy, can you put another quarter in? And my mother's like, I'm gonna put a quarter in, but this counts as a ride.
I think I'm someone who, I never really got over puberty because, well, for a couple of reasons. I think puberty hit me like a ton of bricks, really. First of all, I'm exactly the demographic where for me, puberty coincided almost exactly with like the arrival of the internet and the popularization of the internet. I'm so lucky. I had like 1 to 13 kind of, it wasn't around. And I remember like the one computer in our classroom got the internet. And overnight, like the world just exploded. Everything changed. It was like, we all got our first email addresses. Mine was hotmail@hotmail.com. Thank you. Those were the days you could get the good email addresses, you know? But it was like overnight, the world went from being very manageable. Like everything I needed to know was in just one set of Encyclopedia Britannicas in my parents' basement. It was so relaxing. It was like a finite amount of facts. That was it. The nice thin paper, you know what I mean? It was manageable. It wasn't, and also it was like objective truth. Like no one was putting out like the devil's advocate set of encyclopedias. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, are you sure Lima's the capital of Peru? And then overnight, it was like, and I was obsessed with it. I remember my friends at lunch being like, we're gonna go out and play at recess. Like, do you wanna come? And I'd be like, no, there's so much work to be done on the internet. Like, there's so much going on. I was like, I have to copy and paste images of Buffy the Vampire Slayer into a Word document. I then have to print that Word document. The paper will be sodden with ink. Just heavy with ink. Like, I have to cut those pictures out, and it's gonna be like cutting wet toilet paper. I then have to stick those pictures onto my homework diary. Like, I'm busy. I truly feel like I've been busy ever since. I'm exhausted.
My wife's honest with them. She's honest. 100% honest all the time. The other night we're at dinner, I'm 3 drinks in, the girls go, have you guys ever done drugs? I'm like, what are you, fucking cops? She just goes, yeah. What the fuck are you doing? She goes, you gotta be honest with them girls. I smoked marijuana a couple times. I didn't like it very much. Made me throw up, never smoked it again. But your daddy's done cocaine. I go, what the fuck? I don't think they're looking for recommendations, Leanne. She's like, go and tell him. Go and tell him. Tell him. Tell him the truth now. I was like, okay, I tried cocaine one time. I didn't like it very much. Made me throw up, never did it again. And I hear her fucking laughing. She goes, that's a lie, your daddy's done cocaine a lot. I was like, well, your mom lost her virginity when she was 13. Go ahead and tell him that story. Yeah. Yeah. She's a whore. And she just leans into it. She goes, first of all, I was almost 14. And shit, ain't nothing to do with my hometown but fuck, fight, and race. I'm like, who did I marry, Ricky Bobby?
But we got a lot of shit we need to get some rules and regulations on. We really do. Like, what's the age limit on baby hair? Cause I seen a bitch with gray baby hair the other day. Bitch, you can't have gray baby hair. Here's the rule, if you too old to have a baby, bitch, you can't have baby hair. If your tubes tied, you can't have baby hair. How you don't want to have a baby, but you got baby hair? Bullshit. And for the white people that's sitting in the audience that's confused, looking at me like, what's baby hair? I tell you what baby hair is. Baby hair is when we take regular ass hair that's sitting in coach and move it up to first class. And then we be like, now when you get up there, just show out, just. Now we need to address some of this shit. Cause I'm seeing a lot of shit that's throwing me off. Like I'm seeing a whole lot of old faces with new teeth. What the fuck is going on? And here's the thing, they don't never tell you they got new teeth. You just gotta figure that shit out when you're talking to him. You be sitting there like something new about this motherfucker right here. No, it ain't his hairline, it ain't his eyes, it ain't his nose. You be backing up like, yeah, it's his teeth, it's his teeth, it's his teeth, it's his teeth. And y'all go out and buy the biggest, whitest motherfucking teeth they offer. Now I'm supposed to sit up here and talk to you like I don't see these big white motherfucking teeth in your face. You sitting there smiling like you got a whole row of Air Force One sneakers in your mouth. Come on now. And listen, it's a rule, your teeth not supposed to be whiter than your eyes. It make your eyes look brown. So I'm standing there talking to you, you got Hennessy eyeballs and cocaine teeth. I be like, let me leave before I catch a RICO charge fucking with this nigga here.
When you're in a relationship, a long-term relationship, you settle down into 4 positions. You start out with more, but as the relationship gets on, you settle down to your core 4. The 4 positions you always use. You both know your core 4, but neither of you have ever talked to each other about the core 4. Right now, you're thinking about your core 4. And in the car ride home, you'll talk about your core 4. We're all doing 2 the same. Her on top, him on top. These are classics. They're not going anywhere. Then the other 2 are variables for your relationship. And they are the one that helps her come and the one that helps him come. Your finishing positions. Now, I won't tell you my wife's finishing position because I respect her privacy. But I will tell you mine. I used to finish in doggy when I was a younger man, but as I've gotten older, I now finish in what they call lazy doggy. Lazy doggy is the one where you lay in the spoon position and you grab one tit and you run around. It's a fucking solid position. It's a good position because you feel like you're being active, but you still get a pillow. My wife loves me so much that if she finishes in her position, she'll just get off the cock and she'll lay in lazy doggy and she'll look at me and go on then. And I'm like, thanks, love. I shan't be long.